Welcome to Module 6 on the journey. And this is our last step. It's at least the last step of these pre-recorded modules. But I look forward to at least meeting you virtually 12 times. And as you know the saying, this is really just the beginning of a longer and hopefully exciting journey for you. But it is the last step of these pre-recorded modules. And this module is focusing in on how can you come off to a good start? And how can you feel empowered and inspired by knowing that you are in charge of taking the first steps, and you don't need to wait for a permission slip for anyone. You can decide to take those first steps today. So in this module, we will explore what those steps could look like, and hopefully give you some ideas for your continued journey. As you know, we are living through a critical point in time, and that's probably also why you felt motivated to sign up for this course. And more and more people are starting to contemplate how could they contribute positively to this point in time, this epochal hour of humankind. Because the planet will continue to be here, but the question is really whether we will as well. Living through the sixth mass extinction, runaway climate change, depression and stress level that are just increasing year on year. It's a crazy time to be alive, but it's also an exciting time. And I can guarantee you, having worked within the space of transformation, focusing on sustainability and climate change policy, etc., my entire life, I have never seen things moving at such an exhilarating, in many ways, pace as it is right now. More and more people are starting to explore new kinds of questions within, and are asking different kinds of questions. So maybe I've just decided to be an optimist, but I am quite optimistic in how we are starting to rapidly understand that we need to radically change our ways. And in many ways, currently we are in this space between worlds. We can sense the new, but we don't know exactly what it looks like or tastes or feels like yet. And we feel we are at the end of the world as we've known it. So we are in this liminal space, a word that comes from the Latin word limen, which means threshold. We are crossing a threshold. We are in the process of crossing a threshold. And no one knows exactly where we are going, and that's something that I feel strongly about. Start to doubt people that are telling you that they have the 10-step recipe for getting there, or that can tell you exactly what it looks like. It's something we are in the process of figuring out together by daring to take the needed steps. And it's something we are co-creating together by tapping into the collective intelligence that we are hopefully allowing to flow through us in new ways. And that's also what this module is about. So in many ways, we as a collective have been this greedy caterpillar for the past couple of centuries, just greedily making our way through the world. And right now we are in this gooey space of metamorphosis. We can't really see what's ahead of us, but we get the sensation that there are cracks of light. It can be a time that is incredibly uncomfortable, and that's when we start to kind of cling on to just give us the 10-step process, or just give me the way, and I will start to make my way, but just tell me how. And no one can tell you exactly how. As I said before, we need to tap into that courage within all of us. And we need to put one foot in front of the other. And in many ways, I love this biological metaphor of of seeing ourselves as these imaginal cells. So when the caterpillar is going through its metamorphosis, when it's in that gooey dark state, when it's in the chrysalis, cells that have lied dormant when the caterpillar was just a caterpillar starts to slowly wake up. They look like the caterpillar cells, but they hold within them the higher evolutionary potential of that species. And please see yourself as an imaginal cell that is starting to wake up. And just like imaginal cells within the caterpillar, these imaginal cells then start to group and form. And slowly but surely, they take over, the caterpillar cells die, and the butterfly emerges. So how can we start to be the imaginal cells and find other kindred spirits and start to bring about the change that we want to see in the world? From social studies, we know that it only takes about 12-13% of a collective to start to embody new ways for that collective to start to reach a tipping point and embark on new ways. So have that in mind, that it only requires 12% within an organization to start to talk about new ways, start to talk and embody new regenerative ways, start to talk about biomimicry and circular economy and how can we have a more developmental and respectful culture. It only requires 12-13% of you to start to reach a tipping point for a transformation to happen. And no one can tell us yet whether we will start to make that butterfly transformation in due time. But what we do know is that time is of essence right now. Time is the most precious resource we have right now. And I encourage you deeply from the bottom of my heart to start to change even small ways today and start to put one foot in front of the other today. And what could those steps look like? And now I have a little spider who wants to join. Hello, Wen. Hello, little friend. And also as another fun fact, maybe if you go right above my head, there's a wasp nest that has come so big and they have started to move their eggs. So above my head, there is a lot of wasps swarming around, but that's a part of being in nature. So this shift that I've talked about, and you've seen this slide almost in every module, can only happen if we start to apply another way of thinking, another way of showing up, another way of being in this world. And it all boils down to whether we have the courage to, in our circles of influence, to start to heal the story of separation and start to embody new ways of being and starting to initiate new kinds of discussions that hopefully this course will have equipped you to start to have in your circles of influence, in your organizations, even in your families. Many of you have seen this Einstein in fancy PowerPoint presentations or company reports, or heard visionary people give it in keynote presentations. And I love this as well, and I find it to be so true. But I'm fed up with people using it without consciously starting to apply a new way of thinking. It's almost becoming a bit ironic that people are keeping on using this quote and just still doing what they have always done. We need to courageously start to radically do things differently. And we need to courageously move out the comfortable box and start to see the interconnectedness of life. We have to stop applying this linear solution approach, because that's not what the world looks like. And we need to see what kind of world we live within and start to apply solutions that have this interconnectedness of life embodied in their design. So we live in times that are more complex than ever it is a crazy time for leaders to navigate, for all of us to navigate within. And unfortunately, very few leaders find themselves equipped to deal with this level of complexity. So there's this competency gap that we also talked about in Module 1. And unfortunately, they all agree that what is needed now the most is for us to tap into our true creative ingenuity. But again, study after study show that executives, employees are simply too stressed out of their mind to think outside the box and to be truly creative. And we have to stop seeing stress and mental health and wellness as a side issue and something, oh yeah, I guess we have to look at that as well. We have to move mental health and wellness and the importance of us not being stressed out of our mind front and center, or else we don't stand a chance. And we need to embark on a journey where we, with compassion and care, start to focus on how can we reclaim, rewild ourselves, reconciliate. How can we start to consciously unlearn what doesn't serve us, doesn't serve our organizations anymore? And how can we start exploring things that we may not be able to read in a book? No one can give you the recipe, but you can courageously start to test out new ways of being, new ways of showing up, new ways of leading. And hopefully this course have given you some inspiration as to how you could start to do that and what kind of themes you could start to address and have as topics in your circles of influence. So again, I would like to remind you of the fact that you are a species living on this fascinating planet, and you were shaped and created in nature. So for 500,000 of generations, we have lived completely in tune with nature. Our nervous system, everything was created in deep communion with nature. And that means that we are wired to be constantly in tune and alert and aware of what's going on around us. And that is also part of the reason why so many of us feel stressed out and burned out, because we have so much input coming in to our space every day. We are living in that high beta brainwave mode. And that high beta brainwave mode, as we've talked about in other modules, is what means that we are still alive today. There's much to be grateful for that our brains are able to tap into that brainwave mode. But the problem is that too many of us spend too much of our time in that brainwave mode. And we need to be mindful about that. And we need to constantly recalibrate our nervous system and let our brains get a break and access that other brainwave states that we can access in a state of meditation or relaxation. And the reason I keep on stressing that is that is the portal for new regenerative ways of being. Because when we are stressed and when we are in high beta, we are not able to think in interconnected systems or holistically, we are not really able to be truly compassionate, we become very selfish. And we need to start by operating from another way of being. What we also talked about in Module 5 when we talked about living systems being. And this interconnectedness of stress has to stop, and it can only stop if we start to change our ways from within. And I think many of us will remember times in our lives when we have had too much on our plate, when we have been too stressed out of our mind for various reasons. And we are not really enjoyable, and we are not really creating new regenerative pathways when we are in that state of mind. We become incredibly judgmental, and we can just blow up any second if people are triggering us. And that approach to life and that way of being, that high beta approach to life, is what is preventing us from moving forward in regenerative ways. So that's why I keep on stressing this, because that, as I said before, calming our nervous system and showing up in a regenerative way, that is the starting point. That is the portal for us to be able to create new thriving societies and organizations. So we need to dare heal the story of separation within ourselves and within our circles of influence. We need to dare explore the wisdom of nature in our project and product design. We need to dare spend more time in nature. We need to dare lend the wisdom of our magnificent right brain hemisphere, that part of our brains that are truly able to think outside the box and in abstract, creative, wild ways. We need to embody more of our feminine qualities, and we need to dare tap into our inner emotional navigation system. That is your first steps. Coming to peace and integrating the story of separation within yourself is your first steps. And if we don't do that, we will keep making the mistakes of the past, keep repeating those, and keep falling in love with a new metric or a new strategy or a new political regulation or a new whatever technology we think we need to focus all the time on scaling. But I have seen again and again and again how the messiness of human being, how our shadows and projections and high beta reactive ways of being is messing up relationships and projects and preventing really great things from happening. So that's why it's so incredibly important that we focus to start with on our own ways of being. And no one needs to give you permission to start to change your ways of being. You don't need to you don't need to get executive buy-in or approval from the board. You can start to change those ways today. So one way to start is that you, in your everyday interactions, also the interactions you have with yourself, become more mindful about whether you are tapping into the regenerative you or the degenerative you. And we all have both, of course. So how can you be mindful about when you send an email or when you talk to someone or when you show up in a meeting, to tap into that energy of regeneration, where you are holding space for emergence, when you are tapping into compassion and presence and tapping into yourself to be able to respond from a calmer and wiser place within you. And how can you create new neural pathways within yourself when that becomes your modus operandi? And how can you, with compassion, of course, catch yourself when you are going down a downward spiral into degeneration, when you're showing up from a space of degeneration, when you are in the story of separation, tapping into fear and cynicism and criticism. And we all have experienced being in that space. I don't think any of us are saints, but it's about carefully catching ourselves before we start to go down that degenerative path. And ways of cultivating a stronger alignment with our regenerative ways of being is through daily rituals and practices. It can be constantly nurturing your own inner compass, showing up from your key values, and having a daily practice of meditation, gratitude, all of those great practices that can help nourish your inner emotional landscape and help you bring forth more of your true essence. Because, as it says here, we always have a choice. And we will mess up and we will make failures. And then it's always possible to claim our failures and to say we are sorry and from a sincere space communicate why we are sorry and why we will try to do better. Because we are all human, messy beings and we will all trip and fail, and it's all about being part of healthy relationships where we can hold space for each other's mistakes and help each other learn and grow. And that's also part of what we talked about when we talked about developmental and respectful attitudes in our cultures. How can we all hold space for all of us to be better versions of ourselves? Another great thing to constantly have in the back of your mind is that you have 3 main spheres of influence: your own inner system, the system of your family, your project, your immediate teams, colleagues, etc., and then the greater interconnected systems, the greater interconnected web of life that we talked a lot about in module 3 and 4. And all of what you bring about in the world are constantly tapping into those 3 spheres of influence. And how can we be more mindful around the fact, how can I bring more regeneration to my own inner ecosystem, to the ecosystem upon which I'm a part of, and the greater interconnected ecosystems upon which all life depends. And that is what we are weaving and dancing between those 3 spheres of influence. Another thing that I wanted to make sure I had communicated to you was the importance of accepting the grief that can be associated with living through a time that we are, of acceptance of our failures, as we just talked about, acceptance of where other people are at the moment. And if we don't think they're doing the right thing or don't see the world the way that we do, be compassionate about that and accept that. Accept that sometimes people and projects need time to marinate, and don't force things through. Don't stuff things down people's throats. It will always have negative, degenerative repercussions. But it's also an acceptance around the fact that we are entering unknown territories, uncharted waters. And we just need to accept that we don't have all the answers yet. And it's not the same as apathy or accepting when and putting up with things that doesn't feel right to us. It's not that kind of acceptance I'm talking about. It's the acceptance of the importance of traveling with peace and not getting into that angry, criticizing energy of judgment if we are not satisfied with the pace of others or the speed of others or the thinking of others. That's incredibly important to accept. And for me, acceptance also brings about the quality of peace, and it makes it easier for me to access a deeper way of knowing without that energy that is pushing people away. Acceptance is more of that softening and welcoming, and from that point you can start to, in visionary ways, present new ideas, a new way forward without judging people. And related to acceptance, there's also the quality of liberation and freedom that goes together with acceptance almost. And finding the joy and the freedom and the liberation of walking your own path and finding freedom in that, to move away from the beaten track, and find liberation in them, in sitting with polarities and not being either or, but it can be a both and it can be wildly liberating to go on a path of regeneration and become a regenerator, wildly creative and hopefully fun and exhilarating and enlivening. That's the energy that we need from people right now, that energy of liberation. And connected to that is that important quality and capacity within regenerators that we need to mindfully nourish, of holding opposites without judgment, without fear, criticism, but letting the opposites find their own beautiful alchemy. Instead of, as I said before, it's either this or it's that. It can be both and. It gives me great freedom and liberation to see that life can be both and. And we've been so trained to put things in boxes and either we are this or we are that, and you can't be both. You can have arguments with loved ones and they are still your loved ones. You can disagree highly with someone and still deeply respect them and love them. And again, that is the quality that we need to move with. It's about setting yourself and others free to a greater extent. It's about allowing people to be both and. And that's also part of the entry point to healing the story of separation. You can be both in your masculine and your feminine, your yin and your yang, you can be introverted and extroverted, you can be slow but still moving very fast. So with that energy of being an alchemist for polarities, how do we then hold that compassionate space for the new to emerge, for emergence? Regenerative leaders hold a space, a safe space for emergence to happen. Because as I said in the beginning, no one has the answers. We are in that gooey space of metamorphosis. And collectively, we need to tap into the imaginal groupings to let the higher evolutionary potential of our species be able to emerge. And the way that we do that, also in an organizational context, the way we create new exciting business models, new exciting regenerative products, new exciting regenerative offerings, we need to be able to hold space for emergence in that energy of both and. We need both divergence, exploring, experimenting, wildly testing new things, and then we need consolidating energy of convergence, of grounding, of bringing together, of aligning with our core values. And in that dance, we will be able to bring forth what wants to come through. These new regenerative ideas and visions can be able to manifest if we hold space for them in a compassionate, regenerative way. But maybe all of this is still a bit too difficult for you to grasp. And maybe you really want concrete steps to move forward. So I'm offering this as your concrete steps forward. Start with the ecosystem mapping exercise that we went through in Module 4. Get an overview of where could you start to improve the quality of your interconnected relationships. Where do you need to focus in your life to ensure your ecosystem is in greater health and in greater resilience, so it will be able to withstand systemic shocks and crises that can happen in your life. Take that and then start the organizational ecosystem mapping exercise. Suggest that to a team of colleagues if you don't have executive mandate. Start a book club and start a discussion around, it could be focused around these 3 types of companies that we see in the world today. Where do you feel your organization, what paradigm or what kind of mindset and way of operating is it matching? Is it the orange? Is it the green? Is it the new emerging teal turquoise ways of being an organization that is tapping into the logic of life? And have a conversation around what would it take for us to move in that direction. And of course there is the DNA assessment that I talked you through in Module 5. And you will also find that in the course platform. So that's a very great place for you to start. Get an overview. Get an overview of where to prioritize your efforts. And use that as a discussion framework in your team, in your department, of where could we start to focus more? Where could we improve? What is within our mandate? What could we start to do right now where we don't need to get executive buy-in if you are in a very traditional hierarchical organization where you need those sort of things? Build a strong business case from within. And again, I want to remind you of the 12-13% that social science has shown us that that's what's needed for any movement to start creating that tipping point. So who could you gather to ensure you have 12-13% of the total with you on these on this journey? I've seen many that have used the book that Giles and I co-authored as a starting point. They have bought 5-10 examples out of their own money, handed them out within their organization, and started to have a workshop around that, a little book club. And that's something that I would definitely recommend. That can be a great way of getting started. And if you need more inspiration, there is plenty on the course platform of other resources and books and talks, etc., that you could dive into. So there's plenty of inspiration, but I also want to again encourage you to don't be too confused and too overwhelmed by people that have presented their ideas. And I'm guilty of that as well. And I would even say that for this course or for the book that I co-authored with Giles, don't get too overwhelmed by that. It's all about starting to embark on a new journey from within and carving out regenerative ways for you. What's your core values? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? How could you start to change your circles of influence? And don't get too constricted by believing things has to be a certain way for them to be right. And that's part of the unlearning process that we need to go through. Give up on that, let go of that, and carve your own new ways that feels aligned and true and authentic to you. We need authentic people now more than ever. So that's the starting point. And again, I think I've said this a few times now, but in this space, there's not a one-size-fits-all. We can be inspired by each other. And in the live sessions, I will also invite in great entrepreneurs that is really bringing about change in their organizations. You can meet them and you can learn from them. You can be inspired by them. But there's not one size fits all. It has to be locally attuning. It has to be locally tailor-made to your context and your environment. Yes, we can draw on inspiration, but we need to walk the path ourselves. And finally, see yourself as a weaver. So you're taking different threads and different threads of inspiration and insight and know-how from many different places. Regenerative leadership is drawing on wisdom from more than 100 fields of science. Biology, anthropology, sociology, mathematics. We draw on wisdom from physicists and geologists, and I could continue. We draw on so much wisdom because that's part of the process we need right now. We need an interconnected process, not yet another silo-based process. And you too are a regenerator and a regenerative weaver, lending on wisdom from many different places, and then you are weaving. And in that process of weaving, the pattern will emerge. And the new ways of being and the new ways of running a business will reveal itself through that process of emergence. I hope you've gained a lot from this course. I look forward to meeting you all live in our live sessions. And I hope this last module gave you some final inspiration and hopefully clarity and relief around the first kinds of steps you could start making and taking already today. I look forward to seeing you live. Take good care and be kind and compassionate towards yourself and your others on this exciting journey. Thank you.